Thank you to our honor guard and man of music. Thank you. Now please welcome Wade Swanson, master's candidate in the Robert H. Smith School of Business and former captain in the United States Marine Corps. We ask you to continue standing and join Wade in the Pledge of Allegiance and remain standing for the invocation. The invocation will be offered by Reverend Otis Gaddis III, chaplain of the Episcopalian Anglican Campus Ministry at the University of Maryland. Wade.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
O God of love and justice, we come before you lifting up the lives, the labor, the love, and the sacrifice. What has been done, what is being done now, and will be done in the future. Of those who currently serve this country, and those who have served it that are here, and those who intend to serve it in the future. We lift them up to you. We bring to our own hearts the words of one of your prophets, who called us to know that love and power that have usually been contrasted as opposites, as polar opposites, so that love is identified with resignation of power and power with the denial of love, that duality is false. This prophet, Martin Luther King, taught us that power without love is reckless and abusive, and that love without power is sentimental and anemic. The power at its best is the implementing of the demands of justice. Justice at its best is love correcting everything that stands against love. And so we lift up to you those who have served, are serving, and are serving now, and shall serve in the future. Their call to the bearing of the sword for the cause of love and justice. Sustain them in that call. And for those who have completed their service, gather up the spiritual wealth that comes from the sacrifice that they have made. And in this nation where, through democracy, the will of the people is united in the state, we recognize before you that their call to serve love and justice, and their sacrifice on behalf of love and justice, and their wounds as a result of that sacrifice for love and justice are our wounds, our sacrifices, our call. And we ask you to help us as a society to gather up that which is the bounty that comes from those wounds, for it is written, by his wounds we are healed. The healing to be found in the sacrifices of our veterans, the sacrifices of their families, of our veterans' physical health, their psychological health, their spiritual health. That the bounty that can be given back to us, that we as a society be able to receive it by keeping the promises that we have given them in the sacred bond of trust, that their sacrifices in love for us shall be met by our sacrifices of love for them. Part of that bounty being here, many of them here, gaining an education at Maryland as part of that promise. But we ask you to hold in our hearts, to pour into our hearts a love that goes beyond contractual obligation. A knowing that they are us and we are them. And now at the end, we ask you to hold the lives of those who have given all, whose lives now are in your hands, resting in your bosom. We call to you that you hear our prayer and call them into your everlasting fellowship of your daughters and sons, and at the last day they will be at the feast of your table as the honored guests and ones who welcome us home. For love, by love, with love, through love, in love, for the purpose of greater love. Hear our prayer. In the name of God, the desire of love, the sharing of love, and the power of love. Amen.
Thank you to Wade Swanson and to Reverend Goddess, and please be seated. Today we are celebrating the University of Maryland veteran community of students, faculty, staff, and alumni. We give thanks for veterans in our community who have returned from service and others who are currently serving. We remember dedicated University of Maryland veterans who have passed away, some in the line of duty. Honoring veterans is a revered tradition at this memorial chapel. On October 12, 1952, at the chapel's dedication, Judge William P. Cole Jr., who was then chairman of the Board of Regents, declared that the chapel stands, and I quote, in loving remembrance of those who died in defense of their country. These words held special significance for Judge Cole, since his only son, William P. Cole III, a University of Maryland student, died while serving as an Army captain during World War II. Throughout its 60-year history, the chapel has paid tribute to university veterans, especially those lost while serving. In the early 1960s, an honor book with 209 names of University of Maryland veterans reported to have died during World War I, World War II, and the Korean War was presented to the chapel. Today, the honor book is a treasured object in the collection of the university archives. As a part of today's program, the book is on view this afternoon in the chapel lobby. More recently, through the chapel's Veterans Research Internship, undergraduates have been carefully exploring, one by one, the lives of the veterans listed in the honor book. Ever since its beginning, the chapel has taken enormous pride in honoring the University of Maryland veterans and serving as the home of this annual event. The celebration this afternoon is part of the 5th Annual Veterans Week at the University of Maryland. It's been a collection of programs honoring veterans and raising campus awareness of veteran contributions. Thanks to a generous benefactor, those of you who are attending this ceremony, in your name there will be a donation made to our Veterans Scholarship Program. So thank you all for coming and contributing to that. Now it's an honor for me to introduce a colleague, Mr. Robert Buick, who will reflect on both his time in the military and his experience afterwards. You might say Bob is a lifer here at the University of Maryland. As a 27-year employee of the university, he is a captain of the University of Maryland Police, and he is a training director of the Police Academy. He serves as adjunct faculty for UMUC in the undergraduate Homeland Security program and as a FEMA instructor, teaching critical management, incident management for higher education. He holds a bachelor's degree from College Park and a master's degree from UMUC. Bob spent 6 years each in the U.S. Army and the U.S. Coast Guard Reserve. As he tells it, and this is in his words, he is stationed in such exotic locales as Fort Meade and the Coast Guard Yard in Curtis Bay, both in Maryland. He believes that his dual background in these branches aided him in his academic studies and his career at the University of Police. Bob.
Thank you, Dr. Clement, fellow veterans, families, members, and friends. I appreciate your time in coming today to honor veterans for Veterans Day. I perhaps have a unique perspective of the military, as I grew up in the Army, having been born in the 97th Armored General Hospital in Frankfurt, Germany, at the height of the Cold War. My father served 30 proud years in the U.S. Army, retiring himself as a sergeant major. My parents join us today with my wife, Holly, and I have to say I'm very proud of what they managed to do. 2 deployments to Vietnam, 30 years of moving all over the globe. It's tough to lead a normal life, and they did a fantastic job of taking care of us kids and keeping us sane and sound. Now, I'm proud to call myself a brat. That's not a derogatory term. You'll find that we're all over the place. You never know who the brats are. My own chief, Chief Dave Mitchell, I had found out as an Army brat. His father, too, was a command sergeant major in the U.S. Army. Corporal Jerry Martin, who's here with us today, his father served in the U.S. Army. Lo and behold, his father and my father served together in their waning years of their military careers at Walter Reed. But as a brat, there are things that you do that are normal for you as you grow up. And only when you become an adult and look back, you realize they're not the norm for your average American. So let me give you an example. Overseas, the school bus we rode was Army green, not school bus yellow. We listened to the adventures of Chicken Man. Oh yeah, he was a hero of ours. On the Armed Forces Radio Network, read the Stars and Stripes newspaper, and watched our one American TV channel, the Armed Forces Radio and Television Service. As young kids standing at the bus stop, we could hear them before we could see them. The steady rhythmic clop, clop, clop of combat boots hitting the ground as the GIs were on their morning PT run and they'd come past our bus stop. It was a real kick if we'd get a wave as they went past, but let me tell you something, if we got a shout out in the form of a Jody call, we were in heaven. Later, as I was that young soldier in formation running past that bus stop, guarantee you, they get a wave or a shout out. I recall times where my brother and I would wake up in our bedroom, military housing, and the whole house would be shaking, and there'd be all this noise outside. And no, it wasn't an earthquake. We knew what it was. We jumped to the window and just watched as tank after tank after tank went rumbling down the street. It was the local army unit either going to or coming from the field. It was an awesome sight. For kids, we were just kidding. I haven't seen tanks rolling down my neighborhood street since I've been living in Maryland, and that's probably a good thing. As kids, we rode our bikes to the firing ranges on a Saturday afternoon. I'm not even sure if my parents know this story yet. And we'd go digging in the berms, making sure they're not being used, of course, and hunt for bullets. And the bigger the bullet and the more intact it was, the bigger the prize it seemed to be. We'd hop on our bikes and ride out to the obstacle courses. And what a challenge that was for a kid. Climb everything that was there, do everything that we could. We didn't know they had fancy names like skyscraper, belly robber, six over, things of that nature. And years later, when I went marching into the obstacle course, I remember the collective groan in basic training. As we rounded the corner and people stopped before us. And all I could think of was, oh, we got this. I completed this stuff as a kid, not a problem at all. As a kid in the military, it's normal to see your parents go to the field for a week or two. Usually the father, sometimes the mother, occasionally both. We were just happy we weren't in the Navy because sea deployment of God knows how many months is just so much longer. But Dad would come back with sea rats or sea rations. And that was a real treat. So we'd be digging through his bags to find what he had left over so we could enjoy the John Wayne bars and steel crackers from 1947 that were still good to eat. I gotta tell you, in basic training when I went through, the Army was transitioning to this new thing called MREs, meal ready to eat. But you don't just get rid of these sea rations, you have to consume them. And so we as basic trainees consumed them in great volumes. And I have to tell you, it wasn't nearly as much fun as when my father came home from the field. In the military, moving is the norm. 2 or 3 years, you're on to your next assignment. It comes with opportunities. Places like Germany, Alaska, Korea, Japan. And then they tell you there's exotic places like Africa or Afghanistan. And you'll learn very quickly, when the military calls something exotic, you're not in for a good time. The military is not an AFE. That would be an acronym-free environment. In fact, they thrive on acronyms. And if you've been in, you know terms like TDY, PCS, AWOL, and a host of others. And of course, the ever-famous DD-214. There's no such thing as overtime in the military. Regardless of how many hours you work, your paycheck will be exactly the same. Trust me when I tell you they take advantage of that. And only in the military is getting up at 6 a.m., sleeping in late. I've served in the Army and the Coast Guard, and they are two very distinctly different services. At the time that I was in the Coast Guard, we were part of the Department of Transportation. And it's interesting how the different services see things so differently. The Army is clearly combat-oriented. The Coast Guard is clearly not. In the Coast Guard, we did things like pollution response and port state control, where we were boarding ships at Anchorage, at Inner Harbor, or perhaps in Baltimore. In Annapolis. And I gotta tell you, as a reservist boarding a ship and standing in an engine room, I was on hold of the clipboard. Just whatever you need, I'll write it down, because I don't know what I'm looking at. Thank God the active duty guys did. But in the Army, I learned about fabled items like the left-handed smoke shifter, the delicacy of chicken lips, the danger of snow snakes, none of which actually existed. In the Coast Guard, I learned about the fabled mail buoy and the need for green and red lamp oil, and of course they didn't exist either. And I understand that's a myth shared with the Navy, but after the fact it's still kind of funny. There are other lessons too. I've written these down, talking to several veterans in preparation for this speech. Top 10 lessons. Number 1, if you can see the enemy, they can see you. Number 2, if you can't carry it, wear it, or shoot it, leave it behind. Number 3, an aircraft never has too much fuel unless it's coming in for a crash landing. Number 4, no one calls for rescue in a nice day. They wait for the storm before they call you out. Number 5, any ship can be a minesweeper once. Number 6, outranking someone doesn't mean you control them. Number 7, the quartermaster, that would be the supply guy, only has 2 sizes, too large and too small. Number 8, have a copy of everything, and if it's important, have 2 copies. Number 9, never tell a sergeant you have nothing to do. And number 10, and this is universal, number 10, hurry up and wait. The military, like everything else, changes with time, and I have to admit it's different from when I was in. When I was in, we transitioned from fatigues to BDUs. We phased out the Jeep for the Humvee, and I was the last of the troops to be issued khaki uniforms in basic training, and I wore it exactly 1 time. After I graduated from basic, it was no longer an authorized uniform item. Since then, the helmets have changed. They're no longer steel pods. The uniforms keep changing. I can't tell who's what anymore. The Army even got rid of that green Class A uniform jacket, and it's gone back to its tradition of dark blue, the dress blues that they've modified. And now everyone wears a black beret. But as much as it changes, some things stay the same. You learn to thrive in that environment, and it takes discipline. Discipline to get up early, discipline to work with very little sleep, discipline to march 17 miles because you missed a turn on a 15-mile march, discipline to jump out of an aircraft or off of a vessel, discipline to take responsibility for a multi-million-dollar item like a tank, a ship, a boat, an aircraft, and that goes on and on. That's not unique to what we do here at the university. It's just different. Unlike the military, if you're a student here, you don't have a strict, rigid schedule. You pick your classes and you space them out. But you need that self-discipline to know when to go to class, when to read your books, when to study, when to write your paper, when to go to the library. And you get a lot of that through your military service. Working for the university is the same way. You learn very quickly that you need to be on top of your ball, writing reports, taking care of projects, and meeting those things you need to meet, those deadlines and whatnot, so that you can accomplish your job. The university here is a wonderful place to work, and it's interesting because you slowly realize you're getting older, but the population around you stays the same age. So the lessons I learned in the military stay with me. Those that don't use it anymore get rusty, but some of the basic things are the same, particularly those that deal with leadership and day-to-day management. Good memories in the military are usually centered around good people, and I have to tell you, we have some fantastic people here at the University of Maryland. The colleagues I work with, fellow officers, people around the campus, faculty and staff that I deal with in teams and committees over the years, just remind me how remarkably lucky we are to have them working for the university. If you're a student, you have a Veterans Lounge in Cole Fieldhouse, and I gotta tell you, it's kind of a pleasure to go stopping on occasion. Now, being a police officer, when I walk in, they do a double take and want to know what just happened. But what you have to understand is when I was a student, I belonged to the Vets Club. We had a small hole-in-the-wall office. It was so small that when you sneezed, you offended the guy behind you. But it was our place to hang out between classes, to identify with each other, trade stories, and have a home. And it seems to me that that's what you have in Cole Fieldhouse. And I'll tell you, you'll take those memories with you when you leave the university. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the topic of war. It's the very reason we have the military. And And I can tell you the average person, even in the military, does not want to go to war. And certainly the family members don't want them to go to war either. So I can tell you that it's a very unique subject for members of the military. They're happy to come home, as everybody else is. And so I have a thank you for those of you who served, not just in the service, but who served in combat zones. I was not in that same situation. I served during peacetime when the war was a cold one, and the closest I came to deployment came in the form of the island of Grenada and the occasional hurricane rounds with the Coast Guard. So those of you who served, I offer you a special thank you because you stepped up when the nation had its highest calling. World War II was fought by the greatest generation. Korean War veterans fought the forgotten war. We didn't even call it a war, we called it a police action. But we have not forgotten your service. To our Vietnam veterans, I can only offer you a belated welcome home. You did not get treated well. As a nation, we did not do well by you as veterans, and there are times where you couldn't even tell people you had been in country. We have learned from that and ensured that subsequent campaigns, we treated our veterans differently. But as the son of a two-time Vietnam veteran, I want to especially thank you for your service during a very tough time. Those who served more recently in the Gulf War, Iraq, or Afghanistan, we have a thank you for you as well. It's through you, our newest generation of combat veterans, that we recognize sacrifices not recently seen, and we've rediscovered through you the veteran community. And in 20-something years of my time here at the university, it's only recently that I see the recognition of the veterans of our community, and I find it absolutely wonderful. So for all of you who served wartime or peacetime, active duty, reserve, or National Guard, the fact is you raised your right hand and you took an oath to the service of your country. And I found this statistic remarkable, but only 1% of the American population has served in the military. So I'll close with this. Yes, I'm finally done. In the military, we use buzzwords. When I was in the Army, it was drive on. Now it's HUA. I don't recognize that from my time in the Army. So I had to ask, and apparently it's an acronym for heard, understood, acknowledged. Things like carry on are simply oorah or commonplace. We have a buzzword here at the university as well. I'm always pleasantly surprised when I hear it, but not on campus because I expect it here. It's when I'm in another state. When I'm in places like Savannah, Georgia, Tulsa, Oklahoma, Menominee, Wisconsin, Denver, Colorado, and I gotta tell you, when I'm out, every other shirt I have says University of Maryland. T-shirt, polo shirt, necktie, whatever it is. Clearly I'm proud of my alma mater. But it's because you realize of the reputation this university has nationally and internationally, so that when I'm out of state, I don't expect to hear it. I heard President Lowe just express it last weekend at the veterans reception before the football game. Our buzzword is Go Terps. So I want to thank you, Dr. Clement, and all of you who are involved in making this event possible. There are folks I don't know behind the scenes, but I can tell you that you have made Veterans Day much more meaningful for those who serve. And I thank you very, very much for that opportunity. Thank you all.
Thank you, Bob, for those wonderful memories and reflections. I think you can all see why we hold him in such high regard here at the University of Maryland. Thank you, Bob. Now I'm going to introduce you to Lieutenant Colonel, now retired, Valerie Austin of the United States Army, currently completing her second Bachelor of Science degree while at College Park. Raised in Miami, Florida, Valerie initiated her Army career by attending the U.S. Military Academy at West Point. Commissioned as a military intelligence officer, she served at such varied locations as Fort Stewart, Georgia, Saudi Arabia, and Iraq during Desert Shield and Desert Storm, Germany, Korea, and Maryland. She retired from the Army in December 2008 with over 25 awards and decorations. Valerie holds a master's degree of public administration from the University of Wisconsin, Milwaukee. Valerie, please join us.
Superintendent, distinguished guests, and attendees of the University of Maryland's Veterans Day ceremony. Thank you for allowing me to address you on this solemn occasion. Veterans Day celebrates men and women who have served in the armed forces. As of November 11, 2011, there are over 22.6 million veterans of World War II, the Korean War, Vietnam War, Desert Storm, and the wars of the last decade in Afghanistan and Iraq. Veterans Day has an interesting history. In 1919, the United States and other nations celebrated Armistice Day to mark the anniversary of the end of World War I. World War I was the Great War, or the war to end all wars. At that time, no one believed that the horrors of war would be forgotten or repeated. However, World War II occurred, and the United States suffered over 1 million casualties over the globe. Then our nation went to war in Korea. With these conflicts in succession, a growing number of citizens and civic organizations wanted to celebrate all veterans of the various wars rather than just World War I. In 1954, President Dwight D. Eisenhower signed legislation establishing Veterans Day. As a superpower, the United States is the champion of oppressed people and has projected its influence across the globe to expand democracy and freedom. Thomas Jefferson acknowledged that from time to time, the tree of liberty must be watered with the blood of tyrants and patriots. America's service members' blood and tears allow us to live our lives without the threat of tyranny or invasion. Our service members and veterans are citizen soldiers. They are our brothers, sisters, mothers, fathers, uncles, aunts, and friends. In the past decade, 6,784 service members have died and 48,000 have been wounded in Iraq and Afghanistan. I'm amazed, as it's already been indicated, that currently less than 1%, 0.75% to be exact, of the country's population is a member of the military. As George Orwell quoted, people sleep peaceably in their beds at night only because rough men stand ready to do violence on their behalf. We should not forget our military sacrifices. Today, the United States has over 2.3 million active duty military personnel deployed in about 150 countries worldwide. When they come home and leave the military, every active duty service member will become a veteran. The Merriam-Webster Dictionary defines a veteran as an old soldier of long service. I am a veteran of 21 years in the United States Army and a retired lieutenant colonel. Currently, I do not identify with the old part. However, the definition is an apt description because our veterans bring a wealth of experience and knowledge to any endeavor. We are persistent, dedicated, disciplined, and willing to meet any challenge to accomplish a mission. Despite the administration and admiration of our veterans, these men and women still must compete within the civilian sector for employment and opportunity. The Montgomery GI Bill and the 9/11 GI Bill encourages American veterans and active duty members to pursue higher education. According to a 2010 ABC News report, both Persian Gulf War and Iraq-Afghanistan vets over 25 years old and older who had a bachelor's degree had an unemployment rate of 4.1%, much lower than those with some college or an associate's degree, 10%, or high school graduates of 11.5%. In addition to our older veterans, our nation must seek out and encourage more of our younger veterans to seek higher education. According to the same report, the unemployment rate in 2010 for veterans between the ages of 18 to 24 was 20.9%. In this economic uncertainty, and education beyond high school puts our veterans on par with their civilian counterparts. The pursuit of higher education offers our veterans a means to transition and return to the broader society. The University of Maryland is an exceptional haven for veterans because we are given the opportunity to grow and learn within a nurturing environment. The university's administration, faculty, and staff have extended their support to welcome veterans, and provide resources to help in the transition from soldier to citizen. I applied to the University of Maryland for its diversity in population, academic excellence, and its prestige as a top school in the nation. As a returning student for a second bachelor's degree in a new field, I occasionally feel like a beginner, a greenhorn, a newbie, or a recruit. The veteran trainer is now the student. When it gets a little overwhelming, I take advantage of the many UMD resources available for support, advice, and assistance. At UMD, we have Turk Vets, a student-run veterans organization. The Vet Center has already been mentioned, and Cole Fieldhouse, which is a private study area for vets. And the Veteran Student Life Organization, which supports a seamless transition from military life to civilian college. The integration of our veterans into the university's culture displays sensitivity to these former service members who have put their lives on hold through military deployments, stationing in foreign locations, and fighting our nation's wars. In today's ceremony, the university's community has drawn together to acknowledge the sacrifice and contribution of those who have selflessly given so much. I applaud UMD's ongoing support to our veterans. At this time, I would like to pause for a moment of silence to honor our troops as well as the survivors and heroes of Hurricane Sandy. Thank you very much, and go Terps.
Valerie, thank you for being here to tell your story, and please know how proud we are to have you as one of us. And now our final veteran speaker today is David Boucher, a graduate of the University of Maryland who served in the Massachusetts Army National Guard. Enlisting in the U.S. Army, David's wish was to serve his country, like his father and his grandfather had done before him. In his 7 years of service, including a year-long tour to Iraq, he drove over 11,000 miles, escorting logistics personnel and augmenting security forces. At the end of his tour, David returned home to marry, begin a family, and begin a degree in accounting at the University of Maryland. He graduated magna cum laude in accounting, earning the distinction also of the Pat Tillman Military Scholar. Currently is a certified public accountant in Virginia, working for PricewaterhouseCoopers. It is David's belief that his military service set the standard for his whole life. David, thank you for joining us.
Good afternoon. Hard to follow such great speeches, and thank you, Dr. Clement. So, you've heard a little bit about me. It's been a few years since I last donned my military uniform. Given the separation of time and a little space, this is a nice opportunity for me to reflect. So, I also want to take the opportunity to thank Marcia and Denise, who sent the invitation. I'm excited to share my story, a little bit of my perspective during this time of remembrance. I think officially my service began when I was 17, but truthfully, I think my experience, my veteran's experience, began before that. I think it began when I was much younger, when I was pretending to be on my grandfather's bed, pretending it was a submarine, and I was always the captain, not my brother. It also began when I was running around my house with my father's helmet, and he probably needed it for the field exercises. I like to hide it in my box. So, my point is that veterans' experience begins with our memories. They are my memories, they are your memories. These gatherings are very important because we get an opportunity to share those memories. And sometimes we stray from the actual circumstances every now and again. For instance, my grandfather was sick his whole life, and so there was a lot of stories all about how that came to be. The truth is, I really couldn't tell. I didn't know if he was an Army Ranger or a cook. I heard so many stories. The truth is, I don't really care what the truth was. To me, he is that personal representative willing to sacrifice and did to protect America and all that she represents, her liberty, her justice, her democracy, and her freedom. So with that, there are a couple moments that I'd like to reflect on a couple moments I do reflect on when I think about the veterans' experience. I think the first was when I decided to join. I was at a performance, and the performer asked the veterans to stand and to be recognized. And it was a big audience shortly after 9/11. I wasn't prepared for what happened next. It seemed like my grandfather's whole generation stood up. Hundreds of white-haired men, proud to serve. The second story I wanted to share was when I graduated from PLDC, a NCO academy. After we graduated, we were invited to the NCO clubhouse, which was kind of a cool thing. We always wondered what was inside that. And it's funny, in the center of the club, there was a gentleman from my grandfather's generation. And around him were 5 men from the Korean War. And I wandered over there, mostly because I wanted to know what type of beer they were drinking. And I was introduced to the oldest gentleman. And one of the gentlemen from the Korean War said to me, "This man fought in Iwo Jima." And it's a vague memory for me now. But I remember at some point those guys began to sing. They were having such a great time. You know, from the halls of Mont, I'm not going to do the whole thing. But they started to sing that. It was amazing to me. And when I left that night, they were still sharing their stories. I share these stories with you today because I want to emphasize this to the veteran community. When given the opportunity to stand, stand. You are the living representation of the sacrifice that our nations throughout generations have given to America. You and I know that her liberty, her justice, her democracy, and her freedom, it just isn't free, and it never was. It is your duty to stand. And I share these stories because I want to say, keep telling those stories. I love to hear those stories. It's how we remember. Although, please don't misunderstand me. Not everybody wants to hear you sing. To the civilians, continue to celebrate and thank our vets. We can only feel our obligation to stand and to share if there's someone to listen, like there is today. It's hard to fight when there's no one to fight for. So again, thank you for this opportunity to share, and happy Veterans Day.
Thank you to David for taking time to be with us today, coming up from Virginia. It's really wonderful to hear the stories of the recent alum. Thanks, David. We now want to acknowledge and remember University of Maryland veterans that we have lost in the past year. Displayed in the chapel today are the names of 117 veteran alums who have passed away since October of 2011. Their service to the nation spans decades and covers times of both war and peace. I invite you to reflect on all of the University of Maryland alumni veterans we have lost this year during the next patriotic musical selection from Manor Music. Please join us. thank you, Manor Music. That was just wonderfully moving. Can we have another round of applause for them? Weren't they wonderful? Today we've come together to honor the contributions and sacrifices of our Maryland veterans. As a campus, we want to recognize the service you carry out and the commitment you have made to our nation. To those of you currently in the military, you stand as everyday reminders to your fellow Terps of duty, dedication, and discipline. You bring significant experiences and perspectives to the entire university community. Thank you. To those of you who have served in the past and are connected to the University of Maryland as faculty, staff, or alumni, you are not only models of service and commitment, but are important keepers of history. Our lives today are enriched by your understanding of Americans' military history. We are grateful that many of you can continue to share experiences that help all of us become more informed and responsible citizens. And as David put it so well, we want you to continue to share your stories with us. We will now offer tribute to all veterans in attendance today, as well as their family members and friends who have supported them in their journey. In a moment, members of the Mighty Sound of Maryland will play an armed services medley. I ask all veterans to stand and be recognized when their branch's theme is played. Also, family and friends are encouraged to honor the veterans in their lives by standing during the appropriate hymn. Let's have Terrapin veteran spirit fill this chapel. Mighty sound of the marching band. I hope you can hear our gratitude with our applause. Let's give them another round. We will conclude the formal part of the program with a benediction by Chaplain Raymond Ranker, Lutheran Chaplain, University of Maryland, and the playing of taps by Army Cadet Alexander Downs. Please rise.
I invite you to bow your heads in prayer. O God, with all our hearts we pray for peace. We plead for a world in which nations and peoples interact with one another in peace and with respect, offering not violence and a fist, but an outstretched arm and a handshake. And until that day comes, we give thanks for the men and women who serve in our armed forces, who protect not only our lives and the lives of others, but who uphold and fight for freedom and justice around the globe. Protect them in their service, accompany their families in difficult times, and help us to honor them and care for them and serve them when that duty is upon us, especially after they return and cope with the effects of war. We pray for guidance for our Commander-in-Chief and for all our leaders as they make the difficult decisions to put members of our armed forces in danger. We give thanks for the many men and women who have lived and died serving this country. Today we thank them by taking a memory stone in honor of a University of Maryland veteran and placing it at one of the fountains in the garden or at the center of the labyrinth. As we observe Veterans Day, help us to remember and honor the sacrifice of those veterans and those serving us now, not only this day, but always, so that their sacrifice may not be in vain. In your name we pray. Amen. Retire the colors.
Thank you all for coming, and our Reverend Ranker and Cadet Downs will now lead a procession to the garden where we have a lunch arranged. Thank you all very much.